So a few weeks ago, Tucker Carlson, uh, who was the most watched cable news host in the country, was fired from Fox News. And this sparked a lively discussion about about the utility that can be found from somebody like Tucker Carlson, a corporate news host, Republican corporate news host, basically repeating our message. People who follow this show and agree with me on policy and major issues, repeating our message to a large audience. What was the utility of that? And in that debate, my position was the same as it's been for the last few years when it comes to Tucker Carlson. I don't know why he's doing it, but the fact that on all of these huge defining issues, whether it's COVID, the war in Syria, corporate censorship of social media, and the rogue, unaccountable deep state, and the law enforcement agencies and the CIA that are as lawless as anybody else. My position for years has been, I don't know why he's doing it, but as long as he's doing it, I'm not going to come out here and try to take the knee out from under him every time he does a segment where he basically says the same thing I would say on a given issue, or very presents my point of view to an audience of millions of people who never seen it. But now there has been some more information to come out that challenge what a lot of the critics of Tucker Carlson have been saying, which is that, well, yeah, he might be right on the war in Ukraine, and he might be calling out the war machine and the war profiteers, and how this is just the latest endeavor for the military-industrial complex. Yeah, he might be right about that, but we shouldn't. But somehow it's a bad thing, and Tucker Carlson's only allowed to say those things on Fox News because at the end of the day, he's trying to get anybody, trying to direct people with populist sensibilities, for lack of a better term, into the Republican Party and into xenophobia and racism. That's what Tucker Carlson is there to do. But since he's been fired, information has come out that show he was more of a threat to the establishment than even I thought. And it's undeniable at this point that what seems to be the deciding factor in getting Tucker Carlson fired was the fact that he was on the wrong side of the war machine when it comes to this war in Ukraine. Now, one major piece of evidence was after Tucker Carlson was fired, it was made public that Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, called and spoke to Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, and in a separate phone call spoke to his son just weeks before Tucker Carlson was fired. And that is one mighty coincidence that the literally the only critic of the war in Ukraine on TV happened to be working at Fox News. And then the president of the country at war gives a call to the owner of Fox News. And what do you know, weeks later, that same host is fired. Again, the top most watched cable host in the country. He didn't get fired because of ratings or any other bullshit. He got fired because he was on the wrong side of the war machine, as has been the case and has been proven many times one of the most notable or memorable purges of dissidents and critics of the war was the Iraq War. People like Ashley Banfield and Lawrence O'Donnell and not Lawrence O'Donnell. He was one of the liars who were doing propaganda for the war. But there were a handful of people at the time who were critical of the war, but specifically, let's stick to the case of Ashley Banfield, critical of the war, and then MSNBC buried her, took her off the air, put her, basically put her in a janitor's closet, and kept her under contract so that she couldn't go anywhere else and criticize the war in Iraq. So it's long understood that the military-industrial complex uses corporate media to push their propaganda, their war propaganda, and the very few times that somebody pushes back against it on the air, they're not going to be there that long. And it seems that's the case that happened with Tucker Carlson and this phone call with Vladimir Zelensky and the head of Fox News and the two heads of the Fox News. It's not a coincidence. But it wasn't just that. Also, there were reports, there was an article in Axios that goes over how many leaders in the Republican Party, a lot of the warmongers in the Republican Party who have been getting pushback from Tucker Carlson live on air for funding this war, no questions asked, with a blank check to give to war profiteers in Ukraine who are escalating a war that can lead to possible nuclear exchange. Tucker Carlson, like I've been saying, Tucker Carlson's the only person on TV pushing back against that. And it was especially, his critiques were especially pointed and carried weight when he was leveling them against Republican politicians like Kevin McCarthy, for example. And he was on their ass about this war in Ukraine. And that report in Axios that I just mentioned goes over how some Republican lawmakers, talking to a reporter, says, yeah, we're glad that Tucker Carlson got fired. Him being on Fox News, publicly criticizing the war every week, every night, and then naming and shaming Republican politicians made it hard for them to keep voting for more and endless funding for Ukraine. And let me go over some of the quotes in the Axios article so you have an idea. So the title of the Axios article is quote, "Good Riddance, GOP Lawmakers, Private Glee at Tucker Carlson's Firing." And I'm just going to read you a few of the quick quotes from the article. One of the bullet points says, one of the House Republicans pointed to Speaker Kevin McCarthy's rhetoric this week as a sign of the tides of potentially changing. McCarthy, who'd earlier opposed giving a quote a blank check to Ukraine, gave his full-throated support while speaking to reporters in Israel on Monday. So, for months, Kevin McCarthy has been pretending like he was against the war in Ukraine, and it seems specifically because Tucker Carlson's position on Fox News, where he was vocally criticizing McCarthy's by name. And what do you know, while he is on Fox News after the election, Kevin McCarthy flips on a dime and goes from saying, oh yeah, we need to stop giving blank check to this war in Ukraine, we need to spend this money here, we're giving it to this corrupt country in Europe, and they're threatening, we're risking nuclear war over this. He flipped on all of that shit. He was saying it because Tucker Carlson was in his ass about it. and then now he's not on Fox News, and it was in maybe it's in a week time, McCarthy completely flips. And again, I'm reading from this article about how there are multiple Republican lawmakers excited that Tucker Carlson's gone, not because he said some racist shit on Fox News, not because of his views on immigrants on Fox News. No, they're excited because he made it hard for the war machine to keep on churning. And they're basically acknowledging that. Here's another quote. Quote, Tucker being gone makes my life easier with many things, including Ukraine, one GOP lawmaker said. Quote, though I think somebody will... Here's another quote. Well, no one is more unhappy about Tucker's departure than the Russians. This is what another House Republican said about Tucker Carlson. And a third Republican lawmaker said, quote, Carlson thrived on destroying Republicans. I say good riddance. So I go over all that to show you that the picture is not as black and white as some people were trying to make it seem. And pretending as if all the times where Tucker Carlson is inexplicably right on these huge defining issues like the war in Ukraine, it's because he has some nefarious agenda and he's like this secret agent sent out by the Republican Party to recruit more people, more populists, and sheepdog them into the party. And that narrative seemed too simplistic, and it didn't fit with what I was seeing personally, so that's why I didn't go with it. And it seems that I was right to find more value in Tucker Carlson's position on Fox News, because clearly nobody else is in such a high profile position in media and political life. Nobody else has become such a thorn in the side of the war machine that they have to go to these lengths to shut them down. And I'm specifically talking about the so-called anti-imperialists who are supposed to be who what are the shit libs in new media say? We agree with the politicians. We agree with 90% of the time. Well, what do you know? Just like always, the 10% of the time that we do disagree happens to be something monumental, like giving endless billions of dollars in weapons to literal Nazis. And it's not like a handful of Nazis. There are literal entire divisions and battalions in the military. There are entire factions within the government, people in high-ranking positions who make no... there's no hiding the ball about it. They're upfront about their Nazi white supremacist ideology. All the people that we allegedly agree 90% of the time with, they have no issue giving them a blank check and billions of dollars in weapons to escalate to what the only logical end to what's going on to all this escalation is some sort of nuclear exchange. All the people I agree with 90% of the time, apparently they're not. The military-industrial complex doesn't view them as a threat at all, because what type of pushback have they gotten on Ukraine? Absolutely none. Absolutely none. Because you know what? They're going along with it. When they can, they'll be silent about it and act like it's not going on. All the while, they're going along with the votes. They're voting yes. AOC, Bernie Sanders, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna. All these people who pretend to be against the military-industrial complex, coincidentally, when it comes to what is arguably going to be the most defining war of our lifetime, they're in lockstep pushing exactly what the military-industrial complex wants. More, it's just a blank check and endless weapons and more escalation at every turn. And the only person who was pushing back against that, like I said, in public, in such a high profile, is Tucker Carlson. That's why he's getting this much shit over his position in Ukraine. So much so that he was fired from Fox News. So much so that, and this might not be the only issue that Republican lawmakers are fed up with Tucker Carlson on, but this was for sure was a big fucking one. It was a big one. And also, I talked about some of the clips that I think that of Tucker Carlson's show that need to be spread more widely, especially now that we know that the war machine doesn't want people to see it. Because the guests that he was having on and the monologues that he was doing and the segments that he was doing was presenting information to millions of people who have never seen it. People who are normally Republicans and in lockstep with the Republican Party is normally in lockstep with the war machine. So to have this audience presented with the accurate perspective that we're the bad guys here and we're up to nefarious shit, it was invaluable. Like, I cannot describe that, because like I said before, I don't know what the tipping point is, how many people need to hear this message before there's enough pressure applied to the government where they have to back down from this game of chicken that they're playing with nuclear weapons. But having somebody come out on their show and present an audience of millions of people this perspective every week, I for goddamn sure it wasn't hurting. But it will hurt to not have that person's cut off from that audience. And so I say all that because I have a clip from February of last year, towards the beginning of the Russian invasion, and he has Glenn Greenwald on, somebody who's persona non grata on the rest of corporate news, on MSNBC, because of his the way he challenges power. But yet again, Tucker Carlson has this person on to present a valuable perspective to the audience. So I'm going to play the clip and then come back and just real quick break it down.
Well, one of the most striking things is this immediate climate that has arisen where there's a lockstep, unified script that everyone's required to follow. And if you don't, if you question it at all, you get accused of being a traitor to the United States and or an agent of the Kremlin. And one of the things most remarkable about this is that what you're not allowed to say now is something that people at the highest levels of the U.S. government have been saying for many years. For example, the idea that it is incredibly provocative, legitimately so from the perspective of the Russians, to expand NATO up to Russian borders is something that if you say now, both to identify the cause of the tensions, but also a way out of this war, to say we won't expand any further, including to Ukraine, you get accused of being a Putin spokesman, even though people like the director of the CIA, the current one, William Burns, said back in 2008, warning the Bush administration about expanding NATO on the grounds that it's not just Putin, but everyone in Russia, including his enlightened liberal opponents who view that as a grave threat to Russian national security. Or if you say, we believe that Ukraine is of vital national interest to Russia, but not to the United States, and therefore the U.S. shouldn't risk war directly or indirectly with Russia, you get accused of being a traitor. And yet that was Barack Obama's position for 8 years when asked why he wouldn't flood Ukraine with lethal weapons. And so many of the things that have been long recognized suddenly overnight became taboo. This is an incredibly dangerous war, Tucker. There's two countries with the largest nuclear stockpiles on the planet on opposite sides. And this follows 5 years of extreme hostilities created in Washington due to Russiagate and other things that demanded that we not even talk to Russian diplomats and that we treat them as this grave threat. It's an incredibly dangerous situation. We should have done everything we could to avert the war and should do everything now to try and defuse it. And so if all we have to do, which is the Kremlin position, is promise that NATO will never expand to Ukraine and have Ukraine say the same thing, why aren't we doing that? Maybe that wouldn't work. The Russians say it will, but why haven't we done that until now? And why aren't we doing that now, given how dangerous this war and how horrific this war is to watch unfold?
Again, this was the perspective that was on the #1 watched news show in the entire country every single week. This was not a aberration. This wasn't the one time he had somebody to criticize the war in Ukraine for this entire... No. This was going on every week on Tucker Carlson's show. He was dogged on this. This wasn't just a one-time thing, like I said. And you have somebody like Glenn Greenwald very poignantly breaking down how there's a more to the story than that's being allowed on corporate media. And it's, again, that was the only spot on TV where you'd find that perspective. So while Bernie Sanders and AOC and everybody else is out there doing pro-war propaganda, Bernie Sanders is out there while he's being challenged by anti-war activists out there. Ask them if Putin was paying them. That's the people who agree with me 90% of the time, allegedly. While they're out there voting to give hundreds of billions of dollars to war profiteers to facilitate more death and destruction, and arguably the annihilation of the human race and all life on the planet if a nuclear weapon is to be used as an end result of all this warmongering and all this escalation. All of the people that we put our money and time and energy into getting elected because allegedly they were supposed to represent us and fight back against the corporate establishment on any number of issues, but on a major issue, which was the military-industrial complex and the endless wars. Those people, there is no difference between them and a Lockheed Martin lobbyist who's pushing for more weapons to send to Ukraine. They're all on the same page. They're all repeating the same fucking talking points. But for some reason, Tucker Carlson got a bug up his ass, and on any number of issues, COVID, vaccines, social media censorship, rogue, out of control intelligence agencies, the duopoly theater and the corporate rule that we have in this country, and then again on the war in Ukraine, for some reason Tucker Carlson is getting these issues right, and he is a threat to the establishment. This segment proves it, and I don't really think it's up for debate anymore. So how we proceed, I don't know. I'm not telling you that Tucker Carlson is now a saint. He's still said racist shit. All those things are true. But the point I'm trying to make is we are in desperate times. And if we have somebody who is an imperfect vessel who can spread our idea to millions of people who desperately need to hear it, I think we need to, not we, because I haven't been one of the people doing it. I think some people need to take a step back instead of taking every chance they get to shit on Tucker Carlson, and instead figure out how we can use his voice and his platform to achieve the ends and the goals that we want. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Like I said, I always read every comment. If you guys can help support the show, I'd greatly appreciate it. Cash App, links in the description box, links to PayPal, all those things. Patreon, if you can help support the show, I'd greatly appreciate it. Let me know what you all want to see, and I definitely want to have a conversation about this in the comment section.